Have you ever wondered what the actual secret ingredient is, or maybe the final, most crucial puzzle piece in the high-stakes world of financial audits?
Hmm.
It's that one document, delivered right at the very end, that can genuinely make or break an entire audit process.
It's absolutely true. Yeah. While it might look like just another formality, a piece of paper signed at the last second,
Right.
its absence or any serious problems with it can bring an entire company's financial reporting and the public's trust in it to a grinding halt.
Right.
It's much more than just a tick box exercise.
That's why today we're taking a deep dive into that very document, the Management Representation Letter.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to unpack why it's not just ink on paper, but really a foundational pillar of trust in financial reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is to make every part of this really clear and easy for you to understand.
Sounds good.
The cornerstone of trust, understanding the Management Representation Letter.
Okay, let's unpack this straight away. When we talk about a management representation letter, what exactly are we referring to? What is this document at its core?
Right. So at its core, it's a formal written statement. It comes from the management of a company to their independent auditor.
Okay.
Think of it as management's official way of confirming certain critical facts and responsibilities, things that are absolutely essential to the financial statements being audited.
Got it.
Now, what's particularly interesting, and it may be a bit counterintuitive like you hinted, is that while it's management's statement, the auditor actually prepares the text of the letter.
Ah,
I
okay.
think it's printed on the client's own company letterhead and, crucially, signed by the client's key executives.
Now that's the part that grabs my attention. Why would the auditor, the independent party, right, be the one preparing the text if management is ultimately signing it? Doesn't that risk making it seem less like an independent confirmation and more like, I don't know, something pre-cooked?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question. And it gets right to the practicalities and the professional standards that govern audits.
Okay.
The auditor drafts the letter, not to put words in management's mouth, definitely not. It's to ensure that all the necessary points, the ones mandated by auditing standards and relevant to that specific audit scope, are comprehensively covered.
Ah, okay. So it's like a checklist function.
Sort of, yeah. It's a way to standardize the requests and make sure no critical attestations are accidentally missed. It ensures thoroughness from the auditor's viewpoint.
Right.
But, and this is absolutely crucial, management keeps full responsibility for reviewing it, understanding it, and ultimately owning and affirming its content by signing it.
So they can push back.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If they disagree with anything in that draft, they must raise it and get it changed. Their signature means they fully agree with and believe in the truth and completeness of everything stated in that final letter. So it's really a structured collaboration to make sure all bases are covered, but the final accountability, that rests firmly with management.
Okay, so it's about ensuring all the necessary points are clearly addressed, but management really has to say, yes, we stand by this completely. That makes a lot more sense now.
Exactly.
Which leads me to wonder, who exactly is putting their name on the line here? Who signs this document? And when in the whole audit process does it become this pivotal final piece?
Right, good questions. So who signs? Typically, it's the individuals with the broadest and most direct responsibility for the company's financial and operating matters.
The top brass.
Pretty much. Almost always, this means the chief executive officer, the CEO, and the chief financial officer, the CFO.
Makes sense.
Because they have the most comprehensive knowledge and, ultimately, the accountability for everything covered in the letter. Now, depending on the company's structure or maybe some very specific representations being made, other officers or employees might also be asked to sign for specific sections they oversee. And as for the timing, this letter is obtained right at the very, very end of the auditor's fieldwork.
The absolute end.
Yes, it's truly the final piece of evidential matter gathered. It kind of consolidates everything else.
Huh.
And it's dated the same day as the auditor's report itself.
Oh, okay.
That signifies that management is attesting to the company's financial state right up to the moment the audit opinion is finalized and issued. And importantly, it covers all the financial statements and periods included in the auditor's report.
Wait, even if the current CEO or CFO wasn't there for, say, the previous year, that's also being reported on?
Exactly. Even if current management wasn't present during every single one of those periods, they're attesting to the company's financial health and representations as it stands now, covering that whole time frame.
That's a powerful detail, calling it the final piece of evidential matter. Why is it the absolute last thing? Why not get it earlier in the audit when information is still being actively gathered and discussed?
It's the last piece, precisely because it acts as management's comprehensive final confirmation. Think about it. Throughout an audit, there are countless discussions, right? Analyses of documents, testing procedures. Management makes many oral representations along the way.
Sure, constantly.
This letter brings all those discussions, all that evidence, all those verbal assurances together into one definitive, formal affirmation.
Ah, like a final summary they have to stand behind.
Exactly. It's management's binding statement that at the very moment the audit opinion is about to be released, all material information has been provided, all known issues have been addressed, and they stand completely behind the accuracy and completeness of their financial statements and the systems that produce them.
Right.
It's the final stamp of management's commitment and accountability before the auditor issues their report to the public.
Why it matters, the core purposes of the letter.
Okay, so we've established what this letter is and when it shows up, but let's dig into the why. Why is this document so critical? What are its main objectives that make it such a non-negotiable part of the audit?
Right. There are three primary sort of interconnected purposes for getting this written representation from management, and each one is vital for building and maintaining trust and reliability in financial reporting.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, its purpose is to confirm representations explicitly or implicitly given to the auditor.
Explicitly or implicitly, what does that mean exactly?
Well, think about the whole audit process. Management provides tons of information. Some of it is explicit, like a direct answer to a question, yes, all our sales are recorded.
Okay.
Others are more implicit, understood through the financial records they give the auditor, the internal control systems they show are operating, or even just their cooperative behavior during the audit.
I see.
This letter takes all those verbal assurances and understandings that develop over months of auditing and formalizes them, puts them into a clear, undeniable written record.
Ah, okay.
It basically leaves no room for ambiguity or for management to come back later and claim there was a misunderstanding.
That sounds like a really powerful way to reduce the auditor's risk. It's like getting all those conversations down in black and white undeniably.
Precisely. It creates a robust, documented record of what management asserted. So if down the line there's some dispute or a question about a particular item in the financial statements,
Yeah.
this letter serves as documented proof that management formally affirmed its accuracy and completeness at that time. It helps prevent those situations where management might say, oh, we didn't quite understand that question, or we didn't realize that piece of information was relevant.
Right. Avoids the he said, she said.
Exactly. It significantly cuts down the auditor's risk because they have a formal signed statement from the very top of the company.
You mentioned an analogy before.
Yeah, you could think of it like the final comprehensive summary document that confirms all the verbal agreements and understandings reached during a major, complex project. Everyone signs off on the final plan, making sure everyone is genuinely on the same page and fully committed before launch.
That analogy really helps clarify it.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the second key purpose?
The second purpose is to indicate and document the continuing appropriateness of such representations.
Continuing appropriateness.
Yes, this continuing part is incredibly important. Financial landscapes, company situations, they're dynamic, right? They can change fast.
Sure.
A statement management made 3 months into the audit might have been perfectly true then, but circumstances could easily shift by the time the audit fieldwork wraps up and the financial statements are finalized.
Ah, I see where you're going.
This letter isn't just a snapshot from months ago. It's a direct confirmation that those previous statements and the underlying conditions they described remain true and relevant right up to the very day the auditor's report is issued.
So why is that ongoing aspect, this continuing appropriateness, so vital for the reliability of the audit? It sounds like it's more of a real-time check, not just looking back.
It absolutely is a real-time check. Imagine, say, a company involved in a big lawsuit. Management might have discussed its status with the auditors early on, but what if, just days before the audit report is finalized, that lawsuit is suddenly settled in a way that materially impacts the company's finances?
Right. That could be huge.
Management needs to formally confirm in this letter that this new development has been properly reflected in the financial statements. The continuing appropriateness ensures management is attesting to the current state of affairs, incorporating any significant events, new info, or changes that happen throughout the audit period right up until that final report date.
So it keeps the information fresh and complete.
Exactly. Relevant and complete.
Okay. And the third purpose?
And finally, the third purpose is to reduce the possibility of misunderstanding concerning matters that are the subject of the representations.
Mhm.
This one is all about clarity, precision.
Getting it crystal clear.
Yes. By putting everything in writing, ambiguities are significantly minimized. Oral discussions, while totally necessary during an audit, can sometimes lead to misinterpretations, maybe forgotten details, or even subtle differences in understanding between the auditor and management. A written letter dramatically reduces that risk.
Can you give us a hypothetical scenario, like where an oral statement might be misinterpreted versus a written one, and how the letter protects both sides?
Sure, let's try one. Say, in an informal chat, an auditor asks management, are there any pending significant legal claims against the company?
Okay.
And management replies, maybe a bit casually, none that we're really worried about.
Sounds a bit vague.
Right. The auditor might reasonably interpret that as no material claims exist. But management might have privately meant, well, there are some big ones, but we don't think we'll lose, so we're not worried. That's a subtle but critical difference.
Very different outcomes.
Absolutely. Now, in the representation letter, the wording would be much more precise and legally binding, something like, all known actual or possible litigation and claims whose effects should be considered by management when preparing the financial statements have been disclosed to the auditor and accounted for and disclosed in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework.
Much tighter language.
Much tighter. This written clarity protects the auditor by giving them a precise, verifiable statement to rely on. And it protects management by making sure their confirmation is understood exactly as they intended, preventing any future misinterpretations of their responsibilities or what they knew.
Got it. So it avoids those potential lost in translation moments.
Exactly. It's a very effective shield against those he said, she said situations later on.
The rules of engagement, key requirements, and critical implications.
We've definitely established how foundational this letter is and the profound trust it represents, but this isn't just a handshake agreement, right? This document carries some really serious weight, doesn't it? With strict rules and consequences.
Oh, absolutely right. This is where the rubber really meets the road. This letter isn't optional, it's mandatory for a proper audit. Let's dive into some of the strict requirements and their profound implications.
Okay, hit us with them.
First and foremost, its mandatory nature, the audit's litmus test. The auditor must receive this letter to issue an unmodified opinion.
And an unmodified opinion is the best kind, right? The clean bill of health.
Exactly. It's the cleanest, most positive opinion an auditor can give, basically saying the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. Think of this letter as a crucial gate you absolutely have to pass through to get that clean opinion.
So what happens if management just refuses? For whatever reason, they just won't sign it. What are the severe implications you mentioned?
The implications are, quite severe. If management refuses to provide this written representation letter, it generally results in one of two very serious outcomes for the audit, either a disclaimer of opinion or withdrawal from the engagement altogether.
Whoa. Okay, what's a disclaimer?
A disclaimer of opinion means the auditor cannot express any opinion on the financial statements. They essentially tell the public, we couldn't get enough information or assurances to form an opinion.
That sounds really bad for the company.
It's a massive red flag for anyone looking at those financials. It could cripple a company's ability to raise capital, maintain investor confidence. I mean, think about it. If you hire an expert to check a bridge's safety, and they come back saying, sorry, couldn't tell you if it's safe, I couldn't get enough info or access.
You're definitely not driving over that bridge.
Exactly.
Oh.
It signals a fundamental breakdown of confidence. Withdrawal, the other option is just that the auditor resigns and walks away from the audit completely.
Why such a strong consequence for what, to an outsider, might still seem like just a piece of paper? That signals a really profound breakdown, doesn't it?
It absolutely signals a fundamental breakdown in the auditor-client relationship.
Yeah.
If management refuses to give these formal assurances, it casts significant doubt on the entire audit scope. It suggests a lack of cooperation, or maybe worse, that management might be hiding important information or has unresolved issues they aren't willing to commit to in writing. The auditor fundamentally relies on management's full cooperation and honesty. Without this letter, that foundational trust and documented cooperation are missing. It makes it impossible for the auditor to confidently stand behind their opinion.
So it implies the integrity of the information itself is questionable.
Precisely. It implies the integrity can't be fully vouched for. It's one of those non-negotiable pass key points in auditing. No letter, no clean opinion. Simple as that.
Got it. Okay, what's the next critical requirement?
The second one is that timing is everything. The date match. The management representation letter should be dated as of the exact same date as the auditor's report.
The exact same day.
Yes. This synchronization is crucial because it signifies management is attesting to the financials and all related info as of the precise moment the auditor's opinion is being finalized and prepared for release.
Okay, but what if there are unforeseen circumstances? Like the CFO is stuck on a plane, they just physically can't sign it on that exact day. Are there any allowances?
That's a valid point, a practical concern. And yes, auditing standards do account for truly rare exceptions. Occasionally, circumstances might prevent management from signing and returning the letter on the precise date.
Okay.
When this happens, the auditor might accept management's oral confirmation.
Oral? Like over the phone?
Yes, potentially, provided it's on or before the date of the auditor's report, and management confirms they've reviewed the final letter and will sign it without exception as of the auditor's report date.
But that sounds like a loophole.
But here's the critical detail that cannot be overlooked. Possession of the signed representation letter is still absolutely necessary before the auditor's report can be released to the public.
So the oral confirmation is just a temporary placeholder.
Exactly. It's a temporary bridge, a promise, but it is never a permanent substitute for the actual signed document. The auditor must physically have that signed letter in hand before the financial statements and their opinion can go out the door.
Okay, that closes that loophole nicely. What else?
Next, let's talk about materiality clarified. What's in and what's always in. The source material mentions that representations may be limited to items that management and the auditor agree are material.
Okay.
This suggests that for some things, if a matter is deemed insignificant in dollar value, maybe it doesn't need to be explicitly detailed in the letter.
So if something isn't financially significant, maybe it doesn't need to be covered at all. That sounds like it could potentially create some dangerous blind spots.
That's a very perceptive thought, and it highlights why the standard includes a vital clarification.
Which is?
Materiality considerations do not apply to items not directly related to financial statement amounts.
Okay, like what?
For example, the source explicitly states that all minutes and all financial records should be made available to the auditor. Access to information, fundamental transparency, providing all underlying documents, these things are always considered material, regardless of their financial size or direct impact on a number in the balance sheet.
So management can't say, oh, that meeting minute from 6 months ago wasn't financially material, so we didn't give it to you.
Exactly that. They cannot make that claim. The complete provision of and access to information is absolutely fundamental to the audit's integrity itself.
What's the practical implication of that distinction for someone like our listener, maybe looking at financial statements?
The practical implication is it ensures transparency and auditor access are never compromised by some arbitrary dollar threshold.
Right.
It strengthens the idea that the auditor needs the complete picture to form an informed opinion. If management were to withhold info, even if they truly believed it was immaterial, they'd be violating this representation. That would immediately trigger serious doubts for the auditor, potentially stopping the audit.
So for us, the users?
For you, the user, it means you can have greater confidence that the auditor wasn't arbitrarily limited in their access to the underlying data, which helps underpin the reliability of the entire report.
Makes sense. Okay, what's the last point in this section?
Finally, we need to address the big BUT. When reliability is doubted, this raises a crucial question. What if the auditor does get the letter, it's signed, it's dated correctly, but then they have serious doubts about its reliability?
But isn't the whole point of getting the letter that it is supposed to provide that reliability? If management signs it, shouldn't it be trustworthy?
Ideally, yes. It should provide reliability. However, an auditor's professional skepticism doesn't just switch off because a letter is signed.
Okay.
The auditor is ethically and professionally obligated to evaluate the representations in the letter against all the other audit evidence they've gathered throughout the whole engagement.
So they cross-check it.
Absolutely. An auditor might doubt the reliability because of concerns about management's overall competence, maybe their integrity, their ethical values, or even just their diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Doubts could also pop up because of unresolved inconsistencies between what the letter says and other audit evidence the auditor's already found. For instance, if management states flatly, there's no fraud, but the auditor has independently found conflicting evidence suggesting there might be.
That would be a huge red flag.
A massive one, yes.
Yeah.
That would immediately raise concerns.
So this is clearly not just a rubber stamp exercise, as you said. What are the concrete consequences for the auditor if they get the letter but still have these serious doubts about its truthfulness or management's integrity?
Well, if the auditor concludes that the written representations are not reliable, they absolutely cannot just issue a clean opinion.
Right.
They have to diligently consider the possible effect on their audit opinion. If their doubts are significant enough specifically, if there is sufficient doubt about the integrity of management, the auditor is mandated to take severe action.
Like what? Back to the disclaimer or withdrawal.
Exactly. It could again mean issuing a disclaimer of opinion, saying they can't form an opinion, or even withdrawing from the engagement entirely.
Wow.
This really shows the robustness of the audit process and how it genuinely protects users of financial statements, like you, the listener. It's a critical safeguard. The audit isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about exercising rigorous professional judgment and challenging management statements when necessary.
It reinforces that the auditor's ultimate loyalty isn't to the company paying them.
Exactly. It's to the users of the financial statements, the investing public.
Inside the vault, what management attests to.
Okay, that's quite a lot of weight for one document to carry.
Mhm.
So let's get into the details. What exactly is management signing off on? What's inside this vault, this letter? Can you give us some practical examples of what management is actually attesting to?
Absolutely. The management representation letter is incredibly detailed. It's designed to cover a really broad spectrum of management's responsibilities and disclosures. Let's break down some of the key attestations management makes.
Let's do it.
First, under financial statements and controls. The core responsibilities, management explicitly confirms two fundamental things. One, their responsibility for the fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework.
Like U.S. GAAP.
Exactly. For many U.S. public companies, that means U.S. Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, or U.S. GAAP. This is the big one. They're basically saying these numbers accurately and fairly reflect our company's financial position and performance.
Okay, that's huge. What's the second?
Secondly, they take responsibility for the design, implementation, and maintenance of controls relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error.
So this isn't just about the numbers themselves being correct at the end, but it's also about the system that produces those numbers. That sounds like a really broad responsibility.
It is indeed very broad and fundamental. It means management isn't just saying, here are the right numbers. They're also confirming that the underlying systems, the processes, the safeguards, what we call internal controls, are effectively designed and operating to prevent and detect significant errors or fraud before they even make it into the financial statements.
Wow. Oh.
These internal controls are absolutely foundational to reliable financial reporting. If the controls are weak, the numbers are inherently less trustworthy. So management formally attesting to their effectiveness is a crucial piece of assurance.
Got it. What's next?
Next, consider completeness and transparency. Full disclosure. Management explicitly confirms they have provided the auditor with all relevant information and access as agreed on in the terms of the engagement.
So no holding back documents or access.
Right, ensuring nothing relevant was intentionally or unintentionally withheld, no documents, no records, no access to key people. And equally vital, they affirm that all transactions have been recorded and are reflected in the financial statements.
Why is confirming all transactions recorded so critical? It seems obvious, but I imagine that's where problems can hide.
It's critical precisely because it directly tackles the risk of off-book activities or omissions.
Things kept hidden.
Exactly. If a company has transactions that aren't recorded in their official books, whether it's by mistake or deliberate concealment, then their financial statements are incomplete and misleading. This representation stops management from later claiming, oh, we didn't think you needed to know about that deal, or implying some transactions just weren't part of the accounting records they showed the auditor.
So it's their promise that the statements show the whole picture.
Yes, the entirety of the company's financial activity with nothing material hidden away.
Okay, what else is in there? I imagine fraud must be mentioned.
Oh, yes. A particularly serious section deals with the serious business of fraud. Here, management acknowledges their primary overarching responsibility for design, implementation, and maintenance of controls to prevent and detect fraud.
So it's their job first, not the auditors.
Explicitly, management's responsibility first. Beyond that, management has to make several specific, highly sensitive disclosures related to fraud.
Such as?
For instance, they must provide the results of its assessment of the risk that the financial statements may be materially misstated as a result of fraud, meaning they've done their own internal risk assessment.
Okay.
They also must disclose their knowledge of fraud or suspected fraud affecting the entity involving management, employees who have significant roles related to controls, or others when the fraud could have a material effect on the financial statements.
So known or suspected fraud involving key people or having a big impact.
Yes. And perhaps most broadly, they must disclose their knowledge of any allegations of fraud or suspected fraud affecting the entity's financial statements communicated by employees, former employees, analysts, regulators, or others.
Wow, that last part seems incredibly detailed. Does this mean management has to report every single whisper or rumor they hear, even if it sounds totally crazy?
It's certainly detailed, but it is appropriately scoped. It applies to known fraud, suspected fraud that could affect the entity materially, and allegations that specifically impact the financial statements.
Okay, so not every random rumor.
Not every minor, unsubstantiated rumor, no. However, it absolutely underscores management's proactive and significant role in fraud detection and reporting, and their obligation to be transparent about potential issues that could materially mess up the financial reports.
It puts the burden squarely on them to disclose.
Yes, it places a significant burden of disclosing potential fraud onto management, which is where it rightly belongs, as they're closest to the daily operations and internal information.
Makes sense. What other areas are covered?
Then we move on to laws, misstatements, and litigation, compliance, and clarity.
Okay.
Management confirms that all instances of identified or suspected noncompliance with laws and regulations whose financial effects should be considered have been disclosed. Think regulatory fines, environmental violations, legal breaches with potential financial fallout.
Got it.
They also address uncorrected misstatements. This is an interesting one. Management states they believe the effects of uncorrected misstatements are immaterial individually or in the aggregate to the financial statements as a whole.
Uncorrected misstatements.
Yes, and crucially, a summary of these uncorrected items must be included in or attached to the letter.
We'll come back to that. What about litigation?
And finally, for litigation and claims, management attests that all known actual or possible litigation and claims affecting the financials are disclosed and accounted for properly according to the accounting rules.
Okay, let's circle back to uncorrected misstatements. Doesn't that mean something was found to be wrong, but it wasn't actually fixed? Why would an auditor allow that, and why would management admit to it?
Yeah, that's a perceptive question, and it often causes confusion. Auditors doing their extensive testing might find small errors, maybe a calculation error of a few bucks here, a minor misclassification there.
Trivial stuff.
Potentially. If these individual errors, even when you add them all together, are deemed by both management and the auditor to be immaterial to the financial statements as a whole.
Meaning they don't change the big picture.
Exactly. Meaning they don't change the overall picture or mislead users, then management can assert that their impact is negligible. It's not about hiding errors. It's about acknowledging that some errors are so minor, they don't affect the overall fairness of the statements.
But they still have to list them.
Yes. The crucial part is that these are disclosed in the letter, and a summary of these specific items is provided to the auditor. This actually shows transparency, even about the minor stuff, and proves management is aware of them and formally attests to their insignificance.
Okay, that clarifies it. What about things involving judgment?
Good point. That leads us to estimates, related parties, and future events. Judgment and transparency. For estimates, management attests that the methods, significant assumptions, and data used in making accounting estimates are appropriate. Think about things like calculating the useful life of a big machine, the allowance for doubtful debts, or valuing complex financial instruments. These all involve significant judgment.
Right.
Management confirms their approach is sound and reasonable.
What about related parties?
Regarding related party transactions, management must disclose the identity of all the entities related parties and all related party relationships and transactions of which it is aware, and they affirm these have been appropriately accounted for and disclosed.
And future events.
And for subsequent events, management confirms that all events occurring subsequent to the date of the financial statements and for which the applicable financial reporting framework requires adjustment or disclosure have been adjusted or disclosed. These are significant things happening after the balance sheet date, but before the audit report is issued, like a major fire, a big acquisition, etc.
You know, those related party transactions sound like a potential minefield, ripe for conflicts of interest. Why is that specifically called out in such detail here?
It absolutely is a potential minefield, and that's precisely why it gets such prominence.
Yeah.
Related party transactions involve people or entities that can influence the company or be influenced by it, maybe through family ties, common ownership, control.
Not independent parties.
Right. And these deals might not happen at arm's length, meaning they might not be at market rates or on terms that truly independent parties would freely agree to.
Like selling goods cheap to a subsidiary.
Exactly. Or giving a loan to a director's cousin on super favorable terms. These situations can create conflicts of interest or, worse, be used to manipulate financial results.
I see.
Because of this inherent potential for non-arm's length deals and the lack of truly independent negotiation, transparent disclosure of all related parties and all related party transactions is absolutely vital for financial statement users.
So they can see what's really going on.
Yes, it allows them to understand the true nature of the company's dealings and evaluate potential risks that might not be obvious otherwise.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of standard ground. Is that it, or can it be tailored?
Definitely tailored. Finally, we have tailored additions, entity-specific issues. Beyond all these standard items we've discussed, the auditor must obtain additional representations from management regarding issues specific to the entity's financial statements.
So this ensures the letter isn't just a generic template for every single company.
Precisely. It is highly customizable. While there's a strong standard core, the auditor will meticulously tailor it to address unique client circumstances, industry specifics, or particular audit findings.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. If a company just adopted a brand new accounting rule, management might need to specifically confirm the impact and their correct application of it. Other examples from the source include specific attestations about, say, the impairment of certain assets, management's stated intent to hold specific debt securities until they mature, maybe the obsolescence of inventory in one division, restrictions on cash holdings, or even detailed plans to shut down a major line of business.
All very specific things.
Exactly. These are all highly entity-specific issues that need a formal written confirmation from management to ensure comprehensive coverage and transparency for that unique client situation. It makes sure no stone is left unturned based on the specific context of the company being audited.
Beyond the standard special situations.
Wow, okay, this deep dive really shows just how complex and comprehensive this single letter is. But you mentioned earlier there are even more layers for specific types of audits. This keeps getting deeper and more intricate.
It certainly does. Yeah, the general representation letter covers the core responsibilities for most audits, but certain specialized types of audits trigger additional highly specific representations from management, usually because of unique regulatory rules or the particular nature of those entities.
Okay, like what?
Let's start with ERISA Plan Financial Statements Audit. ERISA is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. It's a U.S. federal law governing most private sector retirement and health plans.
Okay, employee benefit plans.
Right. Audits of these plans involve significant fiduciary responsibilities because they handle huge amounts of people's retirement savings.
So what unique additional representations would the management of an ERISA plan need to provide beyond the standard stuff?
The additional representations are quite specific to how the plan operates and its legal compliance. Management has to attest to several key points.
Right.
First, that they've given the auditor the most current plan instrument for the audit period, including all plan amendments, basically the rule book for the plan.
Makes sense. The auditor needs that.
Second, they acknowledge their responsibility for administering the plan and determining that the plan's transactions are in conformity with the plan's provisions. This specifically includes maintaining sufficient records to determine the benefits due to such participants.
So running the plan correctly and keeping track of everyone's benefits.
Exactly. It speaks directly to their role as fiduciaries. Third, and this one is particularly nuanced, if management chooses to have what's called an ERISA Section 103A3C.
Okay, that sounds technical.
It is. It's a type of limited scope audit. If they choose this, they must formally acknowledge that this election does not affect its responsibility for the financial statements.
Wait, that 103C part? It's a limited scope audit, meaning the auditor isn't fully auditing all the investments, maybe, but management is still fully responsible for that investment information. That seems like a big risk for management to take on.
It is indeed a very specific statutory carve-out allowed under ERISA. For certain types of investments held by qualified institutions like banks or insurance companies, the auditor can rely on a certification from that institution rather than doing full audit testing themselves.
Okay.
But while the auditor's work is limited for those certified investments, management's responsibility for the overall plan financial statements and for making sure those certified investments are properly presented and disclosed remains completely unchanged.
So what do they have to attest to specifically?
Management has to formally confirm they've determined that this limited scope audit is even allowed, that the investment info was properly certified by a qualified institution, that the certification meets Department of Labor rules, and that the certified info is appropriately measured, presented, and disclosed in the plan's financials.
So they're saying, even though the auditor didn't fully check these investment details, we did our homework and stand behind the certified info.
Exactly. They are attesting that they've done their full due diligence and stand behind the accuracy of that certified information within the financial statements. It's a way to streamline audits for certain plans, but it absolutely does not reduce management's ultimate accountability for the whole report.
Got it. What's the other major special situation?
The other significant one involves an internal control over financial reporting, ICFR audit. This happens when an auditor performs an integrated audit.
Meaning they audit both the financial statements and the effectiveness of the company's internal controls over financial reporting.
Correct. This is especially relevant for larger public companies, often due to Sarbanes-Oxley Act requirements in the U.S. And when this happens, even more specific representations are needed in the letter.
What are these crucial additional ICFR representations? What exactly is management signing off on about their own controls?
These are critical because they go straight to the heart of the reliability of the company's entire financial reporting process. Management must, first, acknowledge its responsibility for designing, implementing, and maintaining effective internal control over financial reporting. And, crucially, state that management has performed an evaluation of the effectiveness of ICFR as of the reporting date.
So they take ownership and confirm they've done their own assessment.
Yes, their own independent assessment. Second, they state the assertion and specifies the criteria used to evaluate the assertion. They formally assert whether their controls are effective or not and state what benchmark they use, like the COSO framework, for instance.
Okay.
Third, and this is a key differentiator, ensuring independence management firms that they did not rely on the auditor's procedures as the basis for their assertion.
That point again. The one about not relying on the auditor's procedures. Why is that emphasized so strongly here, too? It still seems counterintuitive to say we didn't rely on the very person checking our work.
It's emphasized so strongly to maintain that absolutely crucial separation of duties and responsibilities. Management owns the internal controls, period. It's their job to design, implement, and monitor them effectively. Their assessment of how well those controls work must be independent of what the auditor is doing.
So the auditor audits the assessment, they don't do the assessment.
Precisely. The auditor audits management's assessment. They don't perform it for management. If management just relied on the auditor's findings to make their own assertion, it would fundamentally undermine management's primary responsibility and independence in the control environment. It's about ensuring management truly stands by their own system, based on their own monitoring and evaluation, not just piggybacking on what the auditor might have found.
Got it. Are there other ICFR-specific points?
Yes, a few more crucial ones. In an ICFR audit, management must also confirm that all significant deficiencies and material weaknesses have been disclosed to the auditor and indicates whether any such deficiencies identified in previous engagements remain unresolved.
Full transparency on control problems.
Absolutely. They must also specifically describe fraud resulting in material misstatement or fraud involving senior management or key employees. Extremely direct and serious disclosure needed there.
Wow.
And finally, they state whether there were any significant changes to internal control over financial reporting after the as-of date of the report. This makes sure the auditor knows about any late-breaking changes that might affect control effectiveness.
And the consequence for not getting these ICFR reps?
Same severe consequence. Just like with the general representation letter, failure to get these specific ICFR written representations is considered a major scope limitation. It generally will result in the auditor's withdrawal from the engagement or in a disclaimer of opinion.
So the stakes are incredibly high across the board.
Incredibly high, yes, emphasizing the absolute necessity of management's formal commitment to their control environment.
The auditor's dilemma and the listener's insight.
Wow, this deep dive really hammers home the incredible weight and fundamental importance of this single document, the management representation letter. It truly is like that final handshake of trust, formalizing everything that happened between management and the auditor.
It absolutely is. And it's essential to just reiterate that critical passkey point from the source material. The management representation letter is required. It's not optional.
Right.
Management's refusal to provide these written representations generally will result in either a disclaimer of opinion or withdrawal from the engagement.
No wiggle room.
No wiggle room. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, this letter serves as that crucial bridge. It formalizes the transfer of information, the confirmation of responsibilities from management to the auditor.
Ah.
The auditor then uses it as a fundamental part of the basis for their opinion, which they issue to the public. It powerfully underlines the concept of management's ultimate, undeniable accountability for the financial statements they put out there.
So, bringing it back to our listener, what does all of this mean for us? For someone just trying to understand financial reports or trying to be informed about how audits actually work, why should you care about this seemingly internal document that you'll probably never actually see?
That's the key question, isn't it? For you, the listener, this letter is a powerful, though unseen, signal of transparency and integrity.
How so?
Well, its very existence, or hypothetically, any issues surrounding its reliability or absence, which would likely prevent a clean opinion, can tell you a lot about the underlying health of a company's internal environment. It speaks volumes about their commitment to truthful reporting.
So if the auditor gives a clean opinion,
If an auditor issues a clean, unmodified opinion, you can know with greater confidence that this critical letter was obtained and was rigorously evaluated as part of that process. It underpins the auditor's confidence in their ability to give that opinion.
I see.
So it gives you, the user of those financial statements, a greater degree of assurance that the information presented is reliable and that management genuinely stands behind it. It's an unseen but absolutely vital layer of protection in our complex financial systems.
What an incredible journey through a document that, honestly, on the surface looks so simple, maybe even bureaucratic.
Yeah.
But it's actually fundamental to the integrity and trustworthiness of financial audits. We started thinking it might just be a piece of paper, and now we understand it's really a linchpin of trust and accountability.
Indeed. So maybe a final thought for the listener. Next time you look at an audit report, that stamp of approval from the auditor. Remember, it isn't just about crunching numbers or checking ledgers.
Right.
Consider the profound layers of assurance and accountability that go into it, including this crucial, often unseen final affirmation from management. And maybe ask yourself, what does this tell you about the inherent trust, the diligence, and the ethical commitment required in our financial systems for them to function reliably?
A fantastic thought to end on. That's all for this deep dive into the Management Representation Letter. We really hope you gained some surprising insights and feel a little more well-informed.
Hope so too.
Keep digging, keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.